Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is John Michael Moy, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Products That Counts is a nonprofit dedicated to enriching the careers of over 500,000 product managers globally. Our mission at Products That Counts is supporting and empowering product managers through a variety of avenues, from our renowned industry awards that recognize its outstanding achievements to our educational webinars like the one that you're attending. We really try to reach and educate product leaders around the world. In past webinars, I've shared how the Canadian tech space continues to thrive and drive innovation across multiple industries. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to another fellow Canadian product leader based in Calgary, which is just 4 hours west from Toronto. Colin Chong is the product head of ThinkLP, an award-winning, industry-leading loss and safety intelligence platform that helps loss prevention, asset protection, safety, and risk professionals protect people and profit. Colin has over 14 years of product experience in leading product strategy in subscription commerce and marketplaces. Now, today's webinar centers around the art of strategic partnerships, which is a really invaluable skill for product leaders. Strategic partnerships have the power to take your product to the next level, opening doors to innovation, market expansion, and really enhancing the customer experience. But how do you build and nurture a partner ecosystem that truly amplifies your product's potential? Before we dive in and I hand you off to Colin, I just want to provide a few housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to all attendees via email. We encourage you to ask questions, so please use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit your questions, and we'll review all your questions at the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Colin Chong. The stage is yours, Colin.
Thank you so much, John Michael, and really appreciate you having me here and getting to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart and my career, mastering strategic partnerships. And so a quick introduction to myself and what the work that I've done. So I've been in product management for, I shudder to think about this, over a decade. It makes me feel way too old. As mentioned, I'm currently the head of ThinkLP, and that's an organization that is in the backgrounds in a lot of the retail asset protection and loss prevention departments that is increasingly something that you might notice as you go shopping through various stores and starting to see a lot more in the way of security and elements that might interrupt your shopping experience. More on that later, but I'm also, in my spare time, director at the Alberta Product Leadership Program. So other than whatever the hours I am officially working, I am also working on helping to provide more training, education, and mentorship to other product managers. So if you do want to connect with me and learn more about any of the work I'm doing, or looking for, if you happen to be Alberta-based or work for an Alberta-based company, I'm more than happy to introduce you to any more of our educational materials. But to dive a little bit further into where I come from, and to help give you some context into where I have color in this space, I started my career at a company called App Carousel, and our partnerships at that organization were really focused on content distribution. But it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because content distribution alone, that's what Google was for. That's what all of these other channels were for. And so App Carousel actually focused on a fairly niche space. Think about all the things you could have bought on your phone in the 2000s, ringtones, games, graphics, all the things for feature phones that you probably get for free now on your smartphone in some way, shape, or form. And so the partnerships in this space were distribution focused, yes, but the real enabling factor around the organization was around the billing aspect of it. In order to get to these distribution channels, which were largely telecommunications carriers, this is where you had to also be able to transact appropriately and then make sure that any of these telcos were able to get their fair share of any of the products that are being sold. So it's a combination of being able to get products to market, as well as being able to ease a lot of those billing scenarios. And in this way, a lot of these relationships were focused on, well, what kind of advantages in this channel and what sort of underutilized properties might make sense here. And so you can imagine for an organization like Sony, if they have this channel, you might not be selling at that point in time full songs. So if you've got a new hit track, it's probably not something that over the 2G, 3G networks is necessarily a great thing to sell. This is where they came up with new products in this particular space to leverage that existing IP to create ringtones and ringbacks. The things that you might hear is tones that aren't necessarily regular ringtones. From there, the company was actually acquired by an organization called AppDirect. And so AppDirect is where I cut a lot of my teeth in terms of looking at partner programs and developing ecosystems. And AppDirect itself is an organization that really focuses on how to help organizations grow their partner programs and monetize them, and in very intricate ways. And so rather than focusing so much on, I would say, content and things for consumer markets, switching the lens to business applications and software. And so the partners that I was working with on a regular basis included companies like Microsoft, Google, and Adobe. And it was really helping these organizations on multiple levels of partnership, on how to distribute their products, on how to involve ourselves as part of their distribution channels, thinking about how do they work with other series of partners to get to market and augment their offerings at the same time. And so this is where AppDirect thrives on not just being able to provide access to different markets, but all the technologies that help make partnerships easier to manage across a variety of different business types. And so from there, I have a combo breaker. I stopped working for companies with app in the front and went to Think instead. And so this is where the entirety of our partnership arrangements is really quite unique. In loss prevention and asset protection, the real focus is on how do you prevent a lot more in the way of loss, profit damage, and things that impact safety in the world. And so work with a lot of major platforms, anyone that happens to be a part of a large enterprise and is an underlying place for productivity. But working with organizations that are part of the liability chain or the law enforcement chain. So we work with companies like Genetech and their security offering to make sure that we understand what's going on in any given scenario, and how to work with law enforcement. And these partnerships are quite unique in that while everyone is working on very common goals, there's absolutely commercial and strategic elements to them. There's a lot of money to be made in this space, but there's an altruistic angle that lies in the balance as well. So there's a balancing of both profit and true real mission and intent as part of these organizations. So I don't know if there's a voting function, but if I was to vote, I had to take a guess. A lot of you have partner programs. And so HubSpot did a poll a little while ago and found that 93% of enterprise organizations have partner programs, which is most of them. I actually would have a really hard time finding ones that don't. And there's a strong reason for this. And when you think about why you partner, this is where you start to come into a common thread. You can't build everything. And so over time, the number of features that your customers ask for continues to increase. It never stops. Product managers, you experience this all the time. You get constant feature requests left, right, and center. And your capabilities, what you can possibly build, is never going to meet that trajectory. And so this is where partners are absolutely necessary to help fill some of that gap. And when you're looking at these partnerships, this is where it starts to become challenging. Ernst & Young did a survey in amongst tech CEOs around what are the hardest things in their ecosystem challenges. And you can see on this list, you have business strategy, planning, IT planning, participant value and risk sharing, governance. And then on the bottom end, I would say are like absolutely a little bit more in the engineering and operation side. So systems integrations, having the right tech stack, data normalization, how do you manage and operationalize these elements? And so particularly in this day and age, given that this is a hard challenge and so many organizations do this, I'm excited to say that this is absolutely a great area for product management and where product managers can add a lot of value. Product managers are essential in the strategy side on working with different constituents on helping to ensure the program is successful. And of course, ensuring that the overall infrastructure and architecture of how these partners come together is well managed. So when we're thinking about partnerships and that first key challenge around partner strategy, this is where if anything, it's very hard to get away from thinking about where this lies. And so partner strategy isn't just a product area. If you think about however you like to stack your strategy or think about it, let's assume that you're looking at vision down. Within your vision, there is some business strategy around how you're going to achieve it and the product strategy and service of that. And this is where partnerships are can be a messy mix in between these things. Again, this is where product management can really add value in between all the different functions that might come into play for establishing and executing the strategy. And so some essentials in thinking through this that you'd be surprised how often they're not well thought through. Because again, everyone wants to partner, everyone wants to have all these strong partnerships. It makes for excellent marketing fodder. Customers ask for it all the time. So number one, determining what the joint value model is. So it's not, please ask partners to come and do your bidding. There has to be value for everyone as part of what you're modeling against in your common markets. Finding the right win-win convergent activities. So if there's always a side that wins out very heavily, it can be hard for that to be sustainable, although there are examples that buck that trend. And then aligning on policies and approach. And these things tend to evolve, but ensuring that as you operate and execute, it's something that everyone has clarity and transparency over. So thinking about the joint value models, this is where there's a number of questions that you need to ask and might be emanating from your strategy already. So first and foremost, what's the source of power that you have? Why should partners work with you? Are you exceptionally strong in distribution? Do you have a link everywhere? Do you have a special capability that no one else has and everyone wants to integrate with? Do you have unit economics that are really powerful? Are you the hottest ticket in town? So there's all these different reasons why someone might be work with you. And so that should form at least the most obvious basis of where partners might want to work with you. The second is thinking about which partners really complement you. And so if they're really far off the beaten track, it's going to be really hard for both you and your customers to appreciate that. So is it like a nice to have partnership? Is it something that your customers work with on a day in, day out basis? The question I tend to ask my customers when evaluating customer complementary factors is, are they swivel chairing a lot between my product and that one? When do they engage with those values versus not? And so if the answer is they're always going back and forth, there's always friction, or there's an opportunity where it's 1 + 1 = 3. That's where I get really excited about what might be an excellent complement. And then is there a reasonable scale behind it? So is this like a really small partnership for a very small segment, or is this something all my customers can use? And I can see more and more partnerships of this ilk coming out in the long run. So if you find something that a partner can leverage and complements you well, it leverages your source of differentiation and power, and you can see growing for a large segment of your customers, chances are you're headed in a really good direction for joint value. And you can see all these really nice convergent opportunities all over the map. And the Apple App Store is the easiest example I can find. They have massive distribution. Everyone wanted the iPhone, but they didn't have all these great things for people to use. So any app developers looking for a new channel, because web and all these other channels were quite saturated, found a new opportunity. So this is a win-win for both parties, developers and Apple. With Salesforce, they have a large, nice, complex platform for CRM. And there's so many administrators out there, consultants, et cetera. And this is where we get a whole segment of people around go-to-market operations. So it almost birthed a new sector and a whole new career category from having these platforms that have a lot of value, as well as a lot of consulting skills to parlay into that. And then on the consumer end, you have organizations like TikTok, where if you have a strong virality algorithm and people with dancing skills, you can fill in a lot of that time between sleep and work and eat. So this is where, again, looking at how you look at these partnerships and how you find partners and these convergent opportunities is key to that strategy. As far as policies and approaches go, this is where, again, there's a few questions that you might want to start prodding yourself through. So understanding your distribution channels, not just to your customers, but how do partners reach them? So if they always have to go through you and it's very hard for them to work with joint opportunities, might present more friction than would be helpful for your customers or for them. Is there a clear path to incentive? So even if they can get to your customers and they can have relationships with them, is there a clear path to business gain? And this one can seem more complex than meets the eye. Are there disincentives? If you bring business to each other, is there a way to reconcile commissions or bonuses or finder's fees and things of that nature? So making sure that there's a clear path to business gain for individuals and organizations is a very key element. And then enablement through this all. Is it actually easy to work together on that joint value? Is all the underlying infrastructure there? Is all the programming in place? And we'll touch on elements of that programming as we go along here. But I want to start going through some of the key elements of these programs as you might be thinking about launching these yourself, or you're in the throes of operating the program. So one of the key points I want to touch on is building participant value and talking about quality. So when I talk about quality, it's really how do you meet the customer expectation of a really compelling offering so that as you build out your partnerships or a partner program, it stands out. This is probably where I find the most problems with most organizations and any of their partner programs. They have some elements of partnerships that are they're useful, but they're not something that draws people into the overall product. And so it's not a particularly compelling offering, and it's not strong enough to have them understand what other partners are there. So maybe they come and have a look, but they never stick around, they never adopt. And so getting to compelling can be tricky. It's sort of like if you went to someone's partner program and you look through the list of integrations they have and you went, I want none of those. So a couple ways. One is, as Apple did, you need to have the killer novel app. So this is where if there is one thing that every customer wants, and it's, again, the hottest thing possible, this is where you might have to go and acquire that thing, convince them to be a partner of some sort, distribute through your channel, but you need to have some sort of draw. Very similar in physical analogy to anchor tenants at a mall. If there's no reason to go to the mall, you probably won't go, even though there's maybe a nice collection of shops and there's a bunch of niches, but you need to have those anchor tenants. Another way to approach it is exclusivity and licensing. So you might not necessarily be able to attract them on the virtues of your channel or your existing incentive programs. So you might need to lubricate that by procuring exclusivity and ensuring that it's the one place that they can get at least one attractive offering. Another approach is to just really assure people of what they're getting. So in say, the Azure ecosystem, they partner with companies like Capgemini, where it's not so much about here's one particular offering. It's for large businesses, and this context is important. They care about ensuring that whatever they're getting is indeed high quality and something that they can rely upon. So whatever compelling means to your audience, it's leaning into those elements that will allow them to understand that value prop the strongest and continue to come to your ecosystem. In terms of the ecosystem dynamics, this question comes up quite a bit. Like, how do you get started with this? By the way, the one resource that I would recommend here is the Cold Start Problem. It's a nice book from Andrew Chen. And he touches on this. Where do you start first? Fundamentally, you have to get to both demand and supply side of any sort of partnership or ecosystem play that you're getting through. But depending on what angle you're coming from, you might start from one side for this or the other. And you start on the harder side. So for B2C or C2C businesses, you'll likely start at the supply side because that's where the constraint is. There's only so many suppliers, and the demand is always going to be there because there's so many consumers. So you see this case with Uber, you see it with most media platforms. A lot of that focus is on building up that supply side. On the flip end, you have B2B businesses, and it's far more demand constrained. So focusing on making sure that there is demand on that customer side for whatever can be supplied. And this is where, again, focusing on ensuring that there's a continuous demand on businesses for whatever functionality is the hard part to continue to draw in for. In terms of monetization, so this is also a continuous problem for a lot of organizations. There is, on two ends of the spectrum, ways to monetize. And so my recommendation is on the early end, if you're starting and building your initial partnership programs and starting your reach outs, keep this as simple as possible because if anything, your learning needs to accelerate here, understanding what actually your customers care about, how you can get those relationships lubricated is going to be key. And so you can do things like referral programs, trading opportunities back and forth, affiliate marketing, so tracking through various programs where any of those connections are being traded. And if you're representing these things, having listings in place so that you can actually show these things off and market them. So the basics of marketing and partner marketing can help you monetize these even from the early get-go from some basic agreements. And this is without thinking about the other end of the spectrum. So as you continue to build momentum on, hey, we have excellent partnerships, there's a lot of complementary offerings, building up even the technical and feature layers, you can then start to think about all the other elements that might be needed to monetize that. And so on the other end of the spectrum, you may have something that's far more transactional. You have multiple channels, be it on web, mobile, in-person selling. You might have multiple parties. You might have multiple different stakeholders to pay out for. You might have to collect payments. This starts to add a number of complications for taxes, for pricing, for various elements around delivery. So this is where I generally advise keep it as simple as you can for as long as you can before you start getting into the transactional area. But that being said, this is where if you are getting into this area and you do believe that this is very beneficial for your organization, there are lots of resources out there and platforms for you to build on, like AppDirect, Stripe, et cetera. There's so many building blocks for building a partner ecosystem and monetizing it that you probably should not be broaching this on your own and trying to build this from the ground up. So the last point I want to make largely is successful partner ecosystems are a team sport. We're talking about product, but product is merely one element of and one team that is involved in this. And so if you think about the maturity around organizations that have partner programs, this is where we have normally some sort of executive sponsor, someone that wants to manage these. It could be in the partner space. It could be marketing. It could be business development. At some point, it involves potentially you in a product function alongside marketing and business development. As deals start to come together, as you're trying to articulate what the offering is or how do you go to market and how do you conduct business together. This is where for product managers, it quite often isn't always one person, particularly as you start to scale it out and as you build up more and more joint features together. And this is often where it's not necessarily just one kind of product manager. So if you start to blow out all the different areas around building a partner program and having integrated feature sets, you might have someone that's focused on operations, how to make sure that all the different features are working together, high availability, and are easy to use. Building the features themselves might be a whole separate use case, or require another product manager. And then managing the commercial aspect of the relationship, and even the economics of it is a whole other skill set on its own. And of course, as these systems mature and you get larger and larger scale partner operations, you'll likely have financial operations in between, trying to ensure that everyone's paid out accordingly. And at some point, if you get really advanced in this, you have a dedicated function. And so a lot of large organizations that I've talked about as examples, there's absolutely massive organizations around these just dedicated to managing partner programs. You don't have to start here, but you can start to see how this expands out. And if you're just on the cusp of this journey, I want to start marking out the things that you'll start seeing and be thinking through. So your operations will include legal. Do you have a easy way to get signed off on your basic NDAs? Do your terms of service apply to your partnerships? Do they address the use cases that they might have? Do they need an entirely separate one? When you're building out enablement materials, you might not have a tech docs team or a marketing, product marketing team that's built out these documents before and have performed training for not customers, but for external partners, and are able then to also provide them support. Do they have the capacity for this? On the technical end, if they're participating in a joint model where they're also part of your product fundamentally, or you're part of their product, do you have all the technical elements in? Is there authorization required across different platforms? Is the feature enablement something that's easy for your partners to manage and for users to come across? Financially, is there the ability to report on these things and being able to pay out or settle or find some way to ensure that everyone's compensated the way that they're expecting? And then from a program standpoint, throughout all of this, is there adequate governance? Does everyone know what's going on, why it's going on? Is there adequate communication and coordination so that customers understand who they need to talk to for support, who they need to turn to around any particular issues, where do they turn to for feature requests? So there's quite a few operations in amongst this entire offering. And so it is truly something that does take that village as you start advancing along. So if you're just getting started, my few bits of advice, deep versus wide, start with those areas that are highest quality. What are your customers asking for? What's the killer app, killer feature, killer partnership that would continue to drive value for them over all others? Ensuring that there's clear impact. So the strategic failures and concerns that a lot of CEOs have in this area are because these early goings aren't yielding the impact that they're looking for. And then ensuring that there's a sustainable engagement. If there's clear impact and you're focused on the right parties, it's much more sustainable than a bunch of ragtag, nice to have potential partnerships that no one's really compelled to work on. And so some shortcuts into this, be where your community is. So you don't have to start and try to pull in partners from just anywhere, even if your customers are mentioning them. There's probably trade groups, conferences, forums, alliances that you can leverage. If they don't have strong partnership programs and they're just loosely based, it's an opportunity to capitalize on that. You don't have to start from scratch. So there's various ways to gain partnerships from a technical architecture perspective to where you might be able to ease that transition into your product. So look at integration platforms as a service, aggregators, different partners in your tech stack that might be leveraging the same tools. Commodity parts, I mentioned this. Most things to build these programs and manage them are available off the shelf. So you don't have to build a lot of these. You don't have to figure out a lot of what the options are. A lot of them are available. And grease the wheels. Sometimes, having said all these things, you build up the distribution networks. You build up the incentives. It's a good offering. you might need to add in additional incentives. And this is where you have things like contests, like in any which way for customers and for your partners, or additional bonuses for participating in your programs, just to ensure that there is, again, those elements of supply and demand involved. And because it's 2024, I want to talk about AI. So AI for me is improving actually the ways that partner programs and partner ecosystems can be managed. So improve ways to collaborate. You can pool your data far more easily and use it in ways that help your customers. So being able to have data that maybe wasn't easy to collate and make useful for customers in the past, that's now easier. And you can fundamentally pool your resources. So joint ventures and joint projects around making sure that there's compute training and features that are going to help your customers do their work faster or gain more functionality because of that joint offering at a data layer level. There's new marketplaces and new ecosystems to explore. So there's AI marketplaces, there's bot marketplaces. So these are opportunities for you to leverage data and to build new partnerships across the different channels that maybe weren't there before. And of course, because of these features, there's now ways that you might think about co-developing products together that might not have existed before. So is there ways that you can leverage your joint capabilities to automate certain aspects of what your customers are looking for, or delight them by producing new content or information that they would find useful? All right. I think I'm at my time here. So a quick recap. Strategy is the hardest thing here. So align on that first. Make sure that you're focused on the best things, quality over quantity for your partners, and get your teams involved. If you're doing this solo, I hope for the best for you, but make sure that this is a cross-functional initiative that you have backup for. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Q&A, and looking forward to connecting with you if you have any questions or want to chat.
Thank you, Colin, for that presentation. And what before we get to Q&A, and I want to encourage all of our guests to submit questions through the Q&A in Zoom. Want to just really sort of highlight just the things that you covered in today's talks. And I think, the thing that I really liked about your presentation was the focus on quality, especially in terms of value to customer, because I think everyone talks, like green fields in terms of what partnership values can add. And I think the way that you articulate was really great, and the examples that you provided were pretty bang on. I'd say the second thing that I really appreciated was just more about the playbook that you sort of outlined in terms of not just the operations, but what is necessary for a sustainable long-term partnership that has to be that a organization needs to do in order to sustain that. So I really appreciated that the way that you laid it out.
Thank you. It is a challenging prospect, if anything, because if I go back to that first point, if 93% of organizations, large organizations, have a partner program, it's table stakes now. And therefore, when you're thinking about how you differentiate, it's increasingly important to understand what the strategy is around ensuring that people recognize the value of your partner program over someone else's. And again, that's where the quality shines. It has the best blank. It has the most distribution. It has something there that no one else has. And so thinking about differentiation in the space is, I think, new compared to like previous years where partner programs were a little bit more novel. It was harder for companies to work together. Now it's something that everyone has to think about a little bit more intently.
No, absolutely. And I think that stat is pretty fascinating. So I think, again, unless like you're in a silo, I mean, every organization, even like conglomerates like just Apple, like they're partnering with OpenAI, for example, to develop their new iOS coming up. So you just see a lot of collaboration happening across across the tech industry. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Colin, was, I think between the both of us, we've, definitely have, experienced launching and managed, partner programs. What are some of the common challenges that you've encountered personally through your professional experience. And would you be able to share, how you've been able to overcome them? And I can definitely share as well too. So that way it's more conversational.
Yeah, no, I'd appreciate the examples that you have, but in my experience, the biggest ones are really around number one, a lack of a compelling proposition to start. So, uh, for a lot of partner programs, it's unclear why someone should care on the upfront. And so developing a proper value proposition to partners upfront around why they should work with you, why they should spend that extra like half hour on a call for introduction, for discovery, for all these different things, for participating in your program, for bringing in their technical resources. Like all these things are expensive operations. And so if the value proposition is irresistible and clear up front, it makes for the entire program to be so much easier for your partners and ultimately for your customers because it's very powerful for your partners. Ideally, that instills more momentum and then is something that shows your customers tractions as well. It does have to form from a basis of it is something your customers really want in order to be attractive. So you can't move away from that. The second biggest thing that I found quite challenging just over the course of the years is the ability for partnerships to continue to grow in a way that both parties are definitely winning on both sides. So this is where it gets more complicated over time. The power dynamics might change. One party might have like way too much power. They might be encroaching in a space. They might be starting to become competitive. This happens on a number of occasions. So I would say, if anything, constant alignment between these organizations, just like any other almost suppliers in certain circumstances, is key. So they're not just separate parties and treating them like suppliers. They're very serious stakeholders that have to be managed, and they're not buyers. So without the mindset that these are parties that need to have their own strategy around how to manage, they can quickly fall into an area where they might become more of a liability than an asset.
Yeah.
I'll put in out an example just to add more color to that. Um, not my organizations, but there's a lot of partnerships that have gone sour because they've started to encroach on each other's spaces. So in retail loss prevention, for example, there's companies that provide the ability to track license plates, and they have the ability to manage data for different investigations. And quite often, not everyone has the same capabilities. So they'll all partner and they'll partner in different ways. And at some point, people will tend to build complementary product areas. And so everyone becomes a bit of a frenemy. And this is where being really clear on your strategy on how you're going to succeed in amongst all these frenemies is really important, because otherwise it becomes harder for your customers to know what are long-standing partnerships, and it's very hard to manage what your feature set are, and how your roadmap's going to get managed in amongst all the partners that you work with.
Yeah, no, I agree with all the points that you've highlighted, Colin. And I'll just kind of add some more just from my own experience. What I would say when I've managed partnerships is that there's always this, like I would say, vision of like this is where our synergies, where we can really complement each other, and then this is where we're going to get to. And I find that the slide that you had, where in terms of keeping things simple, I find that a lot of times, whether it's executive sponsors or even senior leaders within both organizations, their eyes get so big where they will jump, like they will say that they'll go MVP and be very iterative in terms of just testing out the value of the partnership, but then they'll want to go full in before they can really substantiate it. And I find that that's where, going back to your point on quality, I think sometimes the opportunity blinds the partners sometimes, where they're just say there's so much value. It's just because of all these synergies, and they're thinking about the opportunity versus, okay, based on us operationalizing this partnership, what is like, do we get incremental users, or do we increase retention, or have we truly monetized jointly because of this? So that's one of the like biggest mistakes that I've experienced. The second is just I would say expectations from both parties were not always even. So there was the promise of each partner delivering value based on whether it's product, whether it's through synergies, customer base, and there were times they would fall short. It's kind of like you once you both have both parties at the table, you find out that, oh, actually you don't have certain API capabilities, or you don't have certain things that you said you would deliver. And I find that then you're kind of trying to fill the gaps instead of, and then trying to align to then add to the point of quality, which is, going back to your presentation. So I find that there's an opportunity to test and validate. And I find that sometimes the partners aren't always honest with each other or with themselves in terms of what their true capabilities are. And I find that when you're talking about resource investment, like you think that a lot of it's based on scaling, where actually a lot of it's like filling the gaps. Or there was a point in your conversation, which I don't know if I noticed it, if I read it wrong, but you were talking about the operations part of our program. Communication coordination, I think I think you kind of smirked there, and I find that that is actually the biggest challenge with partnerships. It's just the communication coordination. Yes, you do need to invest resources across the boards to have a successful partnership, but a lot of it is that coordination that happens between both parties. So that way, when you're rolling out features that may have some dependencies, those are things where it's not like you're working just with your internal resources and saying, okay, I know when your sprint cycle is going to come, and then I'm going to drop things. Because there's all these interdependencies, it creates more complexity in terms of what value you're trying to unlock to the customer. Yeah.
I,
So
I totally agree. I don't think it's a hot take, but I look at a lot of the partner management and a lot of the joint features and value propositions, uh, not a whole lot differently than most other product management functions. Like just like any other feature, they have to be properly communicated. Just like any other feature, you don't want to stomp out like the potential value by like trying to monetize and like expect immediate growth and value from the initial conversations. And so a lot of the areas that are problematic, I think good product management principles also help with.
yeah. A lot of our audience, are like, I would say, as like a segment of our audience are, I would say, they're just kind of in the initial stages of product management. So, I was curious to get your take on, when you're trying to establish a partnership, like where should product managers, like how do they scale effectively in a partnership without losing focus on quality, as you talked about, or innovation? Like what advice would you give to those who are kind of starting this or developing this muscle in their product management career?
That's a really good question. I think it's fascinating because quite often a lot of these operations end up on product management shoulders, and so it adds more overhead. It's not. I haven't found it typical that like I don't know engineers are responsible for like a lot of the partnership communications, and because it's multifaceted, you might be working with technical partners, you might be working with commercial partners, you might be working with other stakeholders like their sales team that wants to be involved with joint customers. And so for all these operations, I think this is where product managers have to be very judicious with their time and be really transparent with any of their partners where they're hopefully trying to offload some of that work. So for these partnership communications, for example, where they're probably talking about how do we make sure that we're adequately compensated and how we track that. That's probably something that you may be able to delegate to business development, to marketing, maybe not. So that should help to at least try to keep focus. Um, a lot of the operational aspect of it, this is where I would again probably not try to invent it all. given that most organizations have these programs, there's like boilerplate almost programs down to like, here's boilerplate agreements. Here's how you can manage partnerships. Here's platforms for like registering participants. Here's platforms for like just drawing up the marketing materials, getting them to sign the terms and conditions in NDA. So trying to automate as much of this as possible so that there's less overhead for you for scaling this out. I'd still, on the early go, if your partner programs are either very informal or still early on, focus on the few. They should pay out the highest dividends, and just like other features, the ones that you should care about should be just the ones on the top of the list. And then as they materialize or don't, you can start moving on.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. One of the things I when I was, listening to, kind of your approach to partnerships, there was one thing that I wanted to get your take on. Because I think, we've established that most organizations have partnerships. But the thing is, when would be the right time to partner? So I think, I think that's would be like it'd be interesting to get your insight on like what would be like the signs or triggers where it'd be the right time to pursue an external partnership versus doing it yourself, because it's always I mean, because again, if everyone's partnering, then why try to do things yourself? So what would your approach be, or what would you be able to draw an example from your personal experience where you were trying to do something yourself, it's like, what, this doesn't make sense, and maybe we should look externally.
Yeah. So I want to make a distinction between partnering to build like fairly critical functions to your overall product offering. So, for example, if your product offering requires you to have, I don't know, maybe you have a B2B app and it requires you to have info on visitors, and you need to like procure this. You're not going to build a system to procure broad information yourself. So you're going to go and license it or have your customers buy it in and it's pre-integrated. So those sort of things I think are just par for regular feature development and build by partner decisions. Where I'm going to draw a distinction between that and you want to have more partners so that it's more attractive for people to work with you because of the growing amount of functionality that exists because they're well integrated or they're easier to get through your channel. The reason why you start prioritizing this is because you start to see in your customers' workflows and where you specialize in that there's a lot of friction in any of their jobs, such that they have to go and work with all these different point solutions. And without that general partnership in amongst all the different tools that they're using or the different jobs that they're going through, they would be in a position where they'd have to start consolidating at some point. So to some point, you start looking at it as if I don't actually start offering some consolidation of these functions, ability for them to integrate, ability for them to be part of my channel system and network, someone else is going to take that spot, or someone else is trying to take that spot. So I see it as both potentially an offensive or defensive play, depending on your strategy and your market position. But if you start observing that I'm just a point solution in someone else's game and I'm only ever participating in someone else's partner programs, I'd probably be in a scared position, because that's where I might be like some sort of commodity feature. So depending on your overall strategy and how you think about it, if you start noticing that people are just asking you to like be a thing attached to something else, and that's the only thing they see you as, you might not have sustainable value. You might just be a feature in another product at some point.
Yeah. One last question, because we're running out of time. But would love to get, to get your viewpoint on what the future of strategic partnership, how it's evolving in the product management landscape. Because you mentioned AI, which I thought was really great in terms of getting insights on unstructured data. But what trends do you think product managers should be looking for or pay attention to in this space?
That great question. I I think there's probably two big ones that I find are quite interesting. So um, the alliance side is very interesting to me, where there's almost clear lines across certain industry segments where you can start to build an alignment. So I'll take, for example, like there's alliances around headless architecture, and playing in with those, and then building partnerships around ecosystems that are not necessarily just technically based, but based around a certain set of values and certain set of functionality. So I think the trend around just having community-based functionality, and common ways of architecting are going to be critical for a lot of different applications. From a broader partnership perspective, this is where I think a lot of those elements continue to be commoditized. So the ability for you to tap into a larger set of functionality, to monetize sets of functionality, to be able to procure different functions and build them into your application are going to be increasingly monetized. So for example, let's say I want a partnership with Box today.
Mhm.
I probably don't have to sign too many formal agreements to get that integration going. And if it becomes a strong enough channel, I can potentially monetize from them. So the fact that it's so easy to get things hooked together, um, the ability to start generating interesting businesses, and to start getting their attention will start to increase. So the ability to just actually mix and match all these parts and generate new businesses from that, I think will be an interesting challenge for product managers to build commercial viability for and get attention from stronger players, and to really start to leverage some of these larger ecosystems.
No, that's I agree with kind of those insights you provided. So no, thanks a lot, Colin. We're just wrapping up here. So first of all, Colin, thank you very much on behalf of the Park Sci community for joining us today and just sharing all of your great knowledge and experience with about partner ecosystems. And then I'd like to thank the audience for joining in on today's webinar and continuing the product conversation. We'll see you soon. Thank you, Colin, and goodbye, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.